that. Like, what does that look like in terms of recovery from overtraining? Because it's, is it as simple as just resting?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, I think I didn't really know what to do with my time, so it was as simple as resting. It really was just I think I was getting on average 10 hours of sleep. I'd make a point to get to bed really early and wake up when I had to. So, really, it was a big focus on getting a good, long sleep routine in. And luckily, my schedule allowed that with all the free time that I wasn't spending on the bike. And then I applied at first an almost training way to approach to my rest. So the doctors had told me that I was allowed to do like half an hour of easy spinning, like really easy, like soft pedaling, or half an hour of walking. So I was just really strict about my walking. I would get in a good half an hour to an hour walk every day, um, often before work when it allowed it, or after work. So I got really into walking. That was great. And then I started looking at other bits of my life that I could improve to start working towards building a good base and a good routine once I did start training again. So I started looking at things like my morning routines. And so I got better about waking up, having food, and then having coffee, for example. So I started tweaking little things that will hopefully down the road, once I start training again, bring me some benefits. I also made a point to connect with off-bike friends and start spending time with them that I would otherwise have been on the bike, which was really good. So yeah, lots of talking to people that also that was also great. So focus on the easy small things that I did have control over, because I didn't have much control over how I felt.
Yeah, very interesting. The morning routine examination sounds quite a fun look at it. And I love how you say, you approached your resting as though it was training, because also, you laugh at that. But it's doing what you actually know. And I don't think there's any shame in that. It actually makes so much more sense. And if someone has a routine that they really like and they want to swap that out, you can just use them. Like, how does your brain work? What is the easiest way of doing it? And you can kind of do that in that way. And I think that it's actually quite clever how to do that, which it's funny how you mentioned it. And you also mentioned it in an article that you did with one of your sponsors about the weight loss aspect of training, and how you kind of mentioned how it's painful to compare yourself to other people, which again in sport is a huge thing, but it's even more painful to compare yourself to a different version of you, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing it in a critical way of where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously using yourself as a reference point is fine. It can be encouraging, or it can just kind of kick you into motion. But using it as a comparison is
Mm-hmm.
where it actually becomes a line that gets a bit too crossed, is kind of how you were describing it.
Mm-hmm.
How was that part of the training? I mean, in sport in general, for men and for women, it's talked about a lot in women's sport, but it's very prevalent in men's sport as well. Weight, especially when you're on a bike or you're doing cardio in general, but on a bike, it's so much about weight. Like, these bikes are weighed everything within an inch of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the rider, of course, will examine themselves. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What was that kind of experience, or like how did that lead into your overtraining? You did mention the underfueling as well as, but
Mm-hmm.
how did that all link together?
Yeah, I think this is one of the hardest things to talk about, and also a very big contributor to a lot of what has played out over the past year. Because I had accidentally gotten to a really light weight a couple years back, and I briefly saw my performance really. Like I was going really good uphill, and I loved the feeling of feeling strong and fast and light uphill. And taking that feeling I had on the bike, I made a correlation between what I was eating and how I was feeling on the bike, and that quickly spiraled to a very unhealthy pattern. Um, And I think that is what contributed to the first energy deficit that I had a couple years back. Once I noticed that there were some really unhealthy signs in the way I was living my life, with my relationship with food, how my body was reacting. I lost my period for a while. That's when alarm bells started going off, and I realized, oh, okay, wait, maybe this is not right. And then I decided to change my habits. I found a couple female runners that had spoken out on their issue and were talking about fueling and how important it is. And so I decided to make a change. I started fueling, but because my body had been in such a mode of starvation for quite a while, I quickly put on a lot of weight again. And the months where I was putting on weight were also the months that I had committed to a racing team. And so I started my racing season at a weight and that I just wasn't comfortable in. I didn't feel like myself. And so I spent the entire season on the daily thinking about this weight I had put on and how it was slowing me down and how I needed to lose it during the season. And looking back now, I realize that was very damaging thinking. But at the moment, I was so fixated on having to lose this weight in order to be a good athlete. And that did so much damage because it was the whole year I was racing, I was focused on trying to lose this weight. And I had a really hard time with that. I tried working through it on my own. I was not really informed. I didn't consult a nutritionist. And so I would constantly bounce between too much, too little fueling because I didn't know what I was doing. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. And when the weight wasn't coming off, I was very disappointed in myself. And that would transfer onto my feeling on the bike and on race day. And so spending now almost 2 years in that kind of mindset, I think I wish I would have worked with a nutritionist sooner. I wish I would have talked about it sooner because the way I was talking to myself, I think, was really setting me back in my training and in my racing.